Ladies and gentlemen, there have been quite a few rumours over the past couple of weeks or so, including from myself, of a refresh of Nvidia's RTX 40 series of graphics cards. Unfortunately, there's also been a number of conflicting specifications too, and many more of those have popped up over the past day or so. In this video then, I want to give you an update to what Nvidia are allegedly planning with the Super refresh. And because, of course, the refresh is rumoured to launch quite early next year, I'm hearing around CES, but obviously that date could change. I think this is pretty important because obviously Christmas is generally a time a lot of people buy stuff for either themselves or for loved ones, so you may not want to potentially lose, either buying a more powerful card for the same amount of money or potentially saving yourself a couple of $100. To add to this, I want to provide some teases to AMD's plans for the reveal of both Zen 5 and RDNA 4 as well. Now let's kick things off with the RTX 40 refresh, and here's a slide I released about 2 weeks ago. Now, there are a number of different products and specifications here, and I won't read out all of the specs because I'll be here until Christmas, and we're going to go into specifics in a moment with the various SKUs. Now, do note that this slide is about 2 weeks old, and names in particular, for example, Super and TI, have not been decided, at least according to the information I received again about 2 weeks ago. The specifications also may change as well, and this is going to become much more evident as we go through the video. I did, however, want to spend just a second to discuss the 4090 Ti. I did mention this in my last video on this subject, but I just want to mention it quickly because we won't really talk about it again throughout the video, so you can skip forward a minute or so if you want. But basically, it's a bump to 142 SM up from 128. There's also more L2 cache, it's basically fully enabled. Clock frequencies are essentially a mirror of the vanilla card, but obviously boost frequencies kind of a difficult thing to nail down just because of the nature of how Nvidia's boost technology, or AMD's or anyone's, works. And obviously it's based upon a lot of different things, for example power, heat, blah blah blah. Therefore it's possible that your 4090 vanilla may boost to, let's say, 100 or 200 megahertz or 300 megahertz or whatever higher than this without you tinkering at all. And obviously maybe that card would boost even higher, or maybe not quite as much as what the 4090 vanilla does. Either way, I'm told around a 10 to 20% gain over the 4090 vanilla is probable, and we'll get into pricing and stuff later on in the video because it's part of a larger topic. But let's get to the RTX 4080 Super. Now this is where the video is going to become a little confusing, and that is putting it mildly, because not only are there different reports, and it's possible that some of these reports, including for myself, I certainly am holding my hand up, are incorrect. It's also possible, and I think this is probably the most likely scenario, that Nvidia are just testing multiple different SKUs. Now, Benchlife have recently stated the following. There's going to be an RTX 4080 Super, AD102 is going to be used rather than 103. 16 gigabytes of memory gets nudged to 20, and again, you can see on screen that we will indeed be seeing a 320-bit bus, naturally, because again, we have a wider more memory. Now, this seems to be kind of like the specifications I leaked for the 4080 Ti. I mentioned it was, of course, AD102, but you'll notice that my memory configuration was only 16 gigs. Now, interestingly, Coppertite 7, who is well regarded and has had a pretty damn good track record himself, they are also hearing different specifications. They've heard that the 4080 may actually feature less memory than this, and more memory than this, and 20 gigabytes. So it is quite confusing, and that is putting it extremely mildly. Now, what I've basically heard through the grapevine, speaking to one of my sources, and they've got a really good track record. I'm not going to obviously attribute different stories to different people, but what they've essentially told me is that there seems to be, at minimum, 2 variants being tested within Nvidia. Now, whether both of those get launched, or whether only one of them does, or whether there's even more variants being tested, which I suspect there are, I don't know. But basically, there's a 16 and a 20 gigabyte variant being tested. You will also see that there's a 4070 and to 4070 Super. Now again, the naming, I'm being told, I've heard both TI and Super for some of these, And there was even one report, I think it was from Megasize GPU, but I could be wrong on that, so I don't want to misattribute a story. If it's wrong, I apologize. I just can't remember who it was. And they were hearing it was like 4070 Ti Super or something like that. But this is going to be AD 104 to 103. The memory configuration gets nudged up, both in terms of the bus width as well as the capacity. So it's 16 gigs. Now you'll notice in my configuration, I listed that we're looking at 4070 Ti 16 gigabytes with AD 103. So that matches. I've heard it's 68 SM. Now, if you compare that to the vanilla 4070, obviously there's no match at all because the vanilla only has 46, whereas the 4070 Ti, that has an SM count of 60. So obviously this card, assuming my specs are right and they match up slightly to bench lifes, this would essentially mean that we have a small increase in specifications. However, Coppertite is also stating that there's a variant being tested, which is the 4070 Super, and they basically think it's a nerfed version of the 4070. Now, this could be the 4070 Super that I was hearing about, which is 52 SM. Again, you can see my slide on screen. I'm not going to repeat it all because, well, it's just pretty self-evident. Now, I personally, I'm not sure which of these are going to get released or if any of them are going to get released. I mean, there's always a possibility that it simply doesn't. What I would say is that at this point, we're probably going to hear multiple leaked specifications over the next month or so. My guess is that Nvidia are still screwing around with this and they have not made a 100% decision. And I am sure that one of us, either myself, Coppertite, Benchlife, someone has possibly misheard something, or something just got scrapped so early it wasn't even, being a product. And this is no disrespect to them. It's possibly my specs that have been screwed up. It's very hard to know with this stuff because Nvidia, they change specs all of the time. Like, you can seriously, before the 4090 released, if you weren't, following that, go back and look at the stories for the 4090 or the 30 series launch. There were so many leaked specifications for the flagships simply because they just kept making decisions like the last minute. So yeah, that's pretty standard for Jensen. But what about the pricing? Because I'm sure that's much more interesting to a lot of you guys. Like, what's actually going on with it? Because obviously a couple of SMs here or there, but if you've got a budget and one of these cards, let's just hypothetically say, one of the cards launches at like $900 and your budget's like $600. What can you get for $600, right? That's the big one. Now, obviously, none of the cards have an MSRP at this point, but what I'll tell you guys is that I'm hearing there's going to be a price reduction for certain SKUs. The problem is I don't know which ones, because I'm getting conflicting information, whether it's just the new ones or whether it's the entire suite of cards or whether it's the older ones. But I have heard a $100 to $200 price cut seems probable at this point, but it's also possible that this is a slight misunderstanding. Basically, some of the cards may just go EOL, and so Nvidia just want to flush inventory. So they'll put a price cut on the cards which are going EOL. What I'll tell you guys though, and this is my personal opinion, so, if it's wrong, this is just my personal take on things. I would basically say to you guys that if you're considering picking up a card and you can wait, let's say just hypothetically you've got like an RTX 2080 Ti or whatever, and you've got a decent card at the moment, you don't need a new one right this second, just wait. Blackwell, as I've said a billion times, is not going to launch anytime soon. It's like 2025 essentially. That thing gets launched, roughly speaking. So even if you pick one of these cards up, let's just hypothetically say they get released in March next year, you've still got like a year basically of those cards being current. But obviously it's down to you because it's your money. But I also want to mention AMD because as just about every person on the planet, hell, if you took an expedition to planet Zog, somewhere in a distant galaxy, and you asked them, they would say that, yep, we know that AMD are going to release two products next year. Two series of products, RDNA 4 and Zen 5. Now, I won't give you any performance information for Zen 5 because I went over it pretty extensively in a previous video. But what I will tell you guys is that both of the GPU and CPU products Zen 5 and RDNA 4 are probably going to be teased at this stage at CES. Now, this is surprising. If you've been keeping up with AMD for any length of time, they've done this a shit ton of times. Even the original Ryzen had, I think it was Cinebench, and there was a game running. I don't remember what game was, but they were running a couple of games. We had Vega running Doom, actually. Polaris running a couple of games. They've done it with more modern GPUs like RDNA 2 and 3, and a lot of the times they don't even show performance metrics. They just say, hey, it's coming. Now, don't forget, the products like RDNA 4 are probably not going to launch until at least Q2 next year, of course. So it's possible that this could be scrapped. I'm also hearing that Halo products may be delayed until 2025, so Sarlacc and the Ryzen-based Zen 5 X3D parts are probably going to be delayed until 2025. It's possible that this may not happen, but I think it's very likely, given the release dates of Ryzen 8000, that AMD are not going to be in a rush for the X3D variants anyway, if you just historically look at the release schedules. Now remember, again, plans can change last minute, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, because Intel's 14th generation products didn't really change anything in terms of the CPU situation. But I do think that they would want to build up some hype, because obviously it's good for a lot of stuff, including shareholders and mindshare. But also, if Nvidia does do some type of RTX 40 refresh, it's possible that we may see AMD show off RDNA 4. Now, from what I've heard, and others are reporting it now as well, basically RDNA 4 is a little bit slower than N31. I'm referring here to rasterization performance, not something like ray tracing. So it will decently outperform the N32 based product, but it's going to be priced very aggressively. So AMD are going to, of course, compete with flagship performance with Nvidia with RDNA 5, but that's obviously several quarters later. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the company actually does. I'm going to be very interested in CES, of course. I think it's going to be a phenomenal event, like always. With that said, guys, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you did, well, it's YouTube. Do subscribe to the channel, and of course, leave a like, because it does help out a ton. I'll see you guys soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.